The universe had known peace for centuries. Colonies expanded, technology flourished, and the human race, now scattered across the stars, thought themselves untouchable. But on one fateful day, the sky shattered. It began as a whisper, a subtle tremor beneath the surface of Earth, unnoticed by all but the most sensitive sensors. Then, within a matter of hours, the planet itself seemed to breathe. Seismic disturbances erupted worldwide, triggering massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis. But it wasn't just the natural world that reacted. It was as though the planet was waking from an ancient slumber. The storm began soon after, a swirling mass of energy and fury that covered the planet. Its violence not of nature's making, but of something far more primal. The Terran Council, the governing body of human colonies across the galaxy, convened an emergency session. The storm wasn't a random weather phenomenon. It was intelligent, deliberate, and utterly destructive. The storm's energy signature defied all known science, moving like a sentient creature, alive and vengeful. The Council's advisors, many of whom had long dismissed the legends of an ancient planetary guardian, were now faced with the grim reality. Earth was no longer just a world. It was a force. "Prepare the team," Commander Aria Caldwell, head of the Special Operations Division, ordered as she stood before the Council's holographic table. Her voice was steady, though the anxiety in her eyes was unmistakable. She had seen battles fought in the farthest reaches of space, but this was unlike anything she'd ever encountered. The team she assembled was a blend of humanity's finest: soldiers, scientists, and specialists, each enhanced with the latest genetic and cybernetic augmentations. They had all been chosen for one reason: their ability to survive the impossible. But even they were unprepared for the scale of what they were about to face. Aria stood in the command center of the dreadnought ship Vanguard, watching as the rest of the team prepared for the mission. Their destination was clear: Earth. They would descend into the heart of the storm, find its source, and either stop it or, if necessary, destroy it. The stakes could not have been higher. "Team, this is your mission," Aria said, addressing her crew. "We don't know what we're dealing with. The storm's origin is unknown, but we will find it, and we will stop it. We owe humanity nothing less than that." As they neared Earth, the storm became impossible to ignore. The once blue planet was now engulfed in a swirling, chaotic mass of clouds and energy. Lightning arced across the sky in unnatural patterns, and the winds howled with a ferocity that rattled the hull of their ship. They tried to break through the atmosphere, but their trajectory was violently altered as an unseen force seemed to push them back. "Gravitational anomaly detected," shouted Lieutenant Eli Torres, the ship's navigator. His hands danced across the controls, but the ship trembled as if it were a toy caught in the grip of a giant. "Activate the shields," Aria barked. "We're going in. Full throttle." The Vanguard barreled forward, its engines roaring as the storm's wrath fought to tear them apart. They breached the outer edges of the atmosphere, and the moment they did, the ship was hit by a powerful shockwave, so powerful that it sent the entire crew tumbling. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the entire ship groaned under the pressure. "Braced for impact," Aria shouted, her voice barely audible over the noise. The ship shook violently as it plummeted toward Earth. The crew gritted their teeth, prepared for the worst, as the storm's power pulled them into its chaos. They had no choice but to trust their training and the technology that had brought them this far. Their descent wasn't controlled anymore. It was a fall into the unknown. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they crash-landed. Smoke billowed from the ship's damaged engines as the crew struggled to regain their bearings. They were alive, but only just. Aria, disoriented but unbroken, was the first to move. Her enhanced vision scanned the outside world. Dark, swirling clouds blocking out the sun. The ground beneath them trembled with every second, as though the Earth itself was alive. This was no ordinary storm. Something else was happening here. "Report," she ordered, her voice firm despite the chaos. "We've made it through the worst of the storm," said Dr. Arjun Patel, the team's lead scientist, as he accessed his augmented datapad. "The atmospheric readings are off the charts. This isn't just a weather phenomenon. The entire biosphere is reacting." Arya nodded grimly. "Then we need answers. Now." She motioned to the others. "We're going in. Stay sharp. This storm isn't just a natural event. It's a message, and I intend to find out who, or what, is sending it." As the team gathered their equipment and made their way toward the storm's epicenter, they had no idea that they were stepping into the heart of a mystery that would change humanity's fate forever. The air outside the wreckage of the Vanguard was thick with tension. The storm raged around them, a constant roar that drowned out everything but the pounding of their own hearts. The team moved cautiously, their boots crunching on the broken ground, as the atmosphere shimmered with raw energy. The planet seemed to groan beneath their feet as if it were alive, a warning that they had not yet truly understood the threat. "We need to find shelter and gather more intel," Arya ordered, her voice cutting through the howling wind. "Keep your eyes open. Whatever is causing this storm isn't going to just sit idly by." Dr. Patel's augmented sensors were already scanning the sky, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "The storm's epicenter is still moving. It's like the entire planet's atmosphere is being pulled toward one point, as if something's controlling it." "That's what we're here to figure out," Arya replied, her gaze shifting between the team members. "Let's move out." The group pressed forward, making their way through a landscape of twisted metal, shattered earth, and the remnants of what had once been bustling cities. The streets, now cracked and splintered, were eerily silent, save for the occasional crash of distant thunder. The storm, which had seemed so chaotic from above, now appeared almost deliberate, as if it were searching for something or someone. Suddenly, the silence shattered. A sharp, metallic screech echoed in the distance, followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. The team froze, weapons drawn. "I don't like the sound of that," Lieutenant Torres muttered, his fingers twitching near the trigger of his pulse rifle. Arya raised a hand, signaling for the team to hold. "Stay low. We'll investigate." They moved toward the sound, carefully avoiding the debris as they crept through the ruins. The wind howled louder, and the temperature seemed to drop with each passing second, a cold that seeped into their bones despite their advanced suits. The storm was closing in, and whatever lay ahead was the key to understanding its true nature. They rounded a corner, weapons ready, and came upon a startling sight. A massive ancient machine lay half-buried in the ground, its design unlike anything the team had ever seen. It was a towering structure, covered in intricate alien symbols, its surface etched with a kind of organic metal that pulsed with an eerie dim light. Around it, the remnants of a city were buried under layers of rubble, as if the storm had deliberately swept it clean. It was clear that this machine had been here for eons. "What is this?" Dr. Patel whispered, stepping closer to inspect the machine. "This doesn't match any known technology." Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath them rumbled again. But this time, the vibrations were different, deeper, more resonant. A faint hum began to emanate from the machine, growing louder with each passing second. Arya's eyes narrowed. "We've found the source. Whatever's powering this storm is tied to this thing. Stay alert." As if to reinforce her warning, a sudden gust of wind slammed into them, sending debris flying. Arya barely managed to maintain her footing as a flash of blinding light erupted from the machine, blurring the landscape. The storm seemed to react violently, the sky darkening even further, clouds twisting and spiraling like a vortex. "Back! Get back!" Arya shouted, but it was too late. The wind surged with a force that knocked them off their feet. Arya's head slammed into the ground, and for a moment, everything went dark. The world seemed to spin around her, but she managed to keep her consciousness intact, struggling to rise. Through the haze of disorientation, she saw the others. Dr. Patel was sprawled on the ground. Taurus was struggling to regain his footing, and the rest of the team was in disarray. Then, as the storm's fury intensified, a shape began to materialize out of the light. Humanoid, but not quite human. It was a figure of shadow and energy, its form flickering like an illusion. Aria's heart skipped a beat. What is that? The figure moved closer, its presence radiating an overwhelming power. It spoke, though its voice was not a sound but a resonance that vibrated through her very bones. Humans, it intoned. You are too late. Aria's breath caught in her throat. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes locked on the apparition. Who are you? What are you doing to the planet? The figure didn't answer directly. Instead, it raised one arm, and the storm reacted, a blast of raw energy shooting from the machine. The winds howled louder, and the air crackled with an unnatural charge. The team took cover, their weapons trained on the figure. This is it, Aria muttered under her breath, feeling the weight of the moment. We need to end this now before it escalates. But the figure seemed to smile, or at least Aria felt it. It was as though it could sense her fear and resolve, as though it knew that she was the one who would make the ultimate choice. The storm intensified once more, as if answering a question no one had yet asked. The figure before them pulsed with energy, its form flickering like a mirage caught between two realities. Aria and her team stood frozen, their weapons aimed at the ethereal figure, but something about its presence made them hesitate. It wasn't hostile, yet it wasn't benevolent either. There was a chilling calmness about it, as if it were a force of nature itself, indifferent to their plight. You are not meant to interfere. The figure spoke again, its voice reverberating through the storm's chaos. But there was something strange about its tone, something familiar. Who are you? Aria demanded, trying to steady her breath. She didn't know why, but she knew this wasn't just a machine or some alien entity. This felt personal. The storm felt personal. The figure shifted, its form bending and twisting like smoke in the wind. I am Terra, it said, and Aria's heart skipped. The name struck her like a blow. Terra. Dr. Paddle repeated, his voice incredulous. But that's impossible. Terra was a myth, a story told by ancient civilizations about the planet's sentience. It couldn't be real. No one believed. Belief is irrelevant. The figure interrupted, its voice now filling the air with a low hum. You are humans, descendants of those who betrayed me. The words hit like a wave crashing against the shore, knocking Aria back. The storm seemed to grow heavier in response, a palpable weight pressing down on them. The air thickened, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, as though it were alive, shifting to accommodate something greater than themselves. The ancients, Aria muttered, piecing together the fragments of ancient lore she'd studied as a cadet. The first humans, they didn't just build cities. They harnessed the planet itself. Yes, Terra said, its form flickering again, a strange mix of sadness and anger in its voice. Your ancestors were not content with simply living on me. They'd reached into my core, disturbed the balance, and used my essence to expand their empire. They drained me, seeking to dominate the stars, but I was not an object to be exploited. I was, and am, alive. The storm raged louder, the wind whipping around them with a sudden ferocity. Aria's team was struggling to stay grounded as the ground trembled beneath them, as if the very earth beneath their feet was groaning in agony. And when they left me to rot, Terra continued, its voice like the rumble of distant thunder. They thought they could forget, but I have never forgotten. The figure seemed to shimmer and distort, as if the storm itself were shaping it. Aria felt a chill creeping up her spine. She looked at the others, Dr. Patel, Torres, and the rest of her crew. They were all staring, stunned, at the figure, as if some long-forgotten myth had come to life before them. You claim to be Terra, the living consciousness of the earth. Dr. Patel asked cautiously. But why? Why bring the storm? Why punish humanity? I have no need for punishment, Terra replied, its voice growing cold. I am the protector of this world. I was created to preserve the balance of life. It was your ancestors who broke that balance. It was their greed, their blind ambition. And now I wake from my slumber not to destroy, but to remind. Remind, Arya repeated, shaking her head. You've destroyed cities. You've thrown humanity into chaos. This isn't a reminder, it's a reckoning. Yes, Terra said, a low rumble in its voice. The reckoning is inevitable. I have waited long enough. You cannot undo the sins of the past, but you can choose to redeem yourselves, or you can choose extinction. The words were a chilling ultimatum. Arya's grip tightened on her weapon. The tension in the air was unbearable. The storm raged on, and she knew that Terra's wrath was not something that could be easily appeased. The storm was not just a natural event. It was an intelligent force, a reflection of Terra's power and fury, and it was only getting stronger. We came here to stop the storm, Arya said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. We came here to save humanity from whatever this is. You want us to redeem ourselves. How do we do that? How do we stop this storm? Terra's form shifted again, more defined now, more solid. It moved closer, the very air bending around it. The winds howled and whipped, but it was as if Terra itself commanded the storm to retreat, if only for a moment. Your ancestors did not listen when they tried to control me, Terra said softly. You have a chance, a fleeting moment to make the right choice. The storm is not a weapon. It is a test. I will not simply destroy you. If you wish to save yourselves, you must face what was done and undo the damage. Arya clenched her fists, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of her. The team was silent. They had come to Earth expecting a simple disaster, something they could fix with technology and firepower. But this was far beyond their understanding. This was a living entity, a force of nature that had been scared by the very species it had once protected. If we can stop the storm, Arya said, taking a deep breath, what happens then? Can we make things right? Terra's presence seemed to pause, the storm swirling around them in eerie silence. Then it spoke again, its voice like a soft breeze, heavy with ancient sorrow. You can, but only if you are willing to face the truth of your past. The wind howled as Terra's words echoed in the air, heavy with ancient sorrow. Arya stood motionless, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like 100 tons of stone. The truth of what Terra had just revealed, the ancient betrayal, the misuse of Earth's essence, hung in the air like an impending storm cloud. The team was visibly shaken, their faces pale, yet none of them dared to speak. We have to stop this, Arya said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was firm, though her mind raced. What did Terra mean by redemption? How could humanity atone for sins that reached back millennia? Torres stepped forward, his brow furrowed. But how do we fix something this monumental? The storm, it's not just a punishment. It's a test, like Terra said. How do we pass it? Dr. Patel shook his head, his face a mixture of disbelief and fear. It's not just about stopping the storm. Terra's right. What was done to Earth by our ancestors, it was never just about domination. It was a corruption of the natural balance. We can't simply undo centuries of exploitation with technology or weapons. We're facing something much bigger than us. Arya's mind whirred with possibilities, but nothing felt certain. Then a thought struck her, a cold realization that made her stomach churn. What if the storm is the redemption? She whispered. The others looked at her, their expressions unreadable. What if the only way to end this, truly end it, is for one of us to offer a sacrifice, to restore balance by giving something of ourselves, the way our ancestors stole from Earth? There was a stunned silence. Every eye turned toward her, but she stood her ground. This wasn't just a possibility. It was a gut feeling, an instinct that had been gnawing at her since the moment they landed on Earth. The storm wasn't going to stop just because they tried to reason with it. No, it needed something more. "You're suggesting someone die," Torres said, his voice harsh, the disbelief clear in his tone. "We just need to fix our mess." "Not. I'm not saying someone has to die," Arya interrupted, her voice tight. "But if there's a chance, just a chance, that the only way to stop this storm is to balance what was taken from the Earth, then we need to consider it. We need to understand what Terra wants from us." Dr. Patel nodded slowly. "Balance, yes. Terra's storm is a form of reckoning, a response to the disruption caused by human ambition. If there's a way to end it, it's going to require more than just science or firepower. It's going to demand something that our ancestors were too arrogant to understand." The air grew thicker, and the ground trembled again, as if Terra itself was urging them forward. The storm raged in the distance, its intensity seemingly growing with every passing moment. Arya's thoughts turned to her team, their mission, their lives. The choice they had to make was no longer a theoretical one. The storm was closing in, and time was running out. "We don't have time to waste," she said, setting her jaw. "We need to act. We'll head toward the heart of the storm, and whatever we find there, we'll make the choice together." Torres hesitated, clearly not ready to accept the implications of Arya's words. But before he could speak, a sudden tremor shook the ground, more violent than before. The air thickened, and the sky above darkened with unnatural speed. The storm was moving faster than they anticipated. "We can't wait," Arya snapped. "Move out, now." Without further argument, the team gathered their equipment and set off, moving as swiftly as they could through the ruins of the ancient city. The storm had ravaged much of the landscape, leaving behind shattered structures and twisted remnants of what had once been a thriving civilization. But the heart of the storm, Terra's epicenter, was still ahead, hidden deep within the planet's core. As they neared the epicenter, the storm's fury reached a fever pitch. The wind howled like a beast in pain, lashing out with torrents of rain and jagged streaks of lightning. The very air seemed charged with an unnatural energy, a living force that pushed against them at every step. "We're close," Dr. Patel said, checking his scanner. "The energy readings are off the charts. Whatever's causing this, it's not a natural phenomenon. It's something else entirely." As the storm intensified, the ground beneath them began to pulse, rhythmic like a heartbeat. The very earth seemed to be alive, and each pulse seemed to draw them closer to whatever lay ahead. Finally, they reached the heart of the storm, a vast, cavernous structure carved into the bedrock, its surface smooth but covered in ancient symbols that pulsed with the same eerie light as Terra's form. The storm's intensity peaked around the structure, but the air inside the cavern was strangely still. "This is it," Arya said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stepped forward, and the others followed suit, their boots echoing in the eerie silence. Then, as they entered, something strange happened. The storm outside, while still raging, seemed to calm. It was as if Terra itself had allowed them to pass through, giving them a final chance. The cavern's walls began to hum, resonating with a low frequency, as though the structure itself was alive, waiting. A sudden, chilling realization dawned on Arya. The storm wasn't just an enemy. It was a living being, a guardian of Earth's essence, and it had allowed them to reach this point, perhaps to test their resolve. But in the quiet of the cavern, one thing became painfully clear. Only one of them could make the ultimate sacrifice. "We can't all make it out of here," Arya said, her voice trembling despite her resolve. "There's only one way forward." The cavern seemed to breathe around them, the pulsating walls casting flickering shadows that danced like ghosts in the low light. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of decisions yet to be made, and the storm outside, though still raging, no longer felt as immediate as it once had. Here, in the heart of the storm, there was silence, a silence that felt more like a pressure, a command to make a choice. Arya stood at the center of the cavern, her gaze moving from one member of her team to the next. Dr. Patel, Taurus, Lieutenant Lara Jones, and the others, all their faces were etched with the same uncertainty. The reality of what lay before them, the choice they had to make, was sinking in, and the weight of it was unbearable. "We've reached the heart of it," Arya said, her voice steady but hollow. "But I think we all know what this means. The storm is here because of the imbalance caused by humanity. It's not just a test of strength, but of sacrifice." Dr. Patel stepped forward, his face pale as he clutched the scanner in his hands. "The structure here, it's not just a machine. It's a part of the planet, a living part of it. But more than that, it's a conduit. It channels Earth's essence, its life force, and it's been damaged by the greed of humanity. The storm is a manifestation of that damage." Arya nodded grimly. "And we're here because Terra gave us one last chance to correct the wrongs. The storm won't stop until that balance is restored, and I think we all understand that." Her words trailed off. None of them spoke for a long moment. They knew what had to be done. The storm's heart, the machine, the structure, whatever it was, could not be stabilized without sacrifice. Earth had been wounded by their ancestors, and now, in the only way Terra would accept, the price had to be paid. Torres clenched his fists. "So, one of us has to." "There's no way around it," Arya said, cutting him off. Her eyes were resolute, though she could feel the tightness in her chest. "The only way to stop the storm is to offer a part of ourselves, a piece of our essence, something equivalent to what was taken from Earth." There was a collective silence. It wasn't the kind of silence born of uncertainty, but one of acceptance. Each member of the team knew that they had come too far to turn back. But who would make the sacrifice? "I don't care what it takes," Torres said, his voice hard but steady. "If it's going to stop this storm, I'll do it. I'll give whatever it takes." Lara Jones, the sharp-eyed sniper, stepped forward. "No, if anyone's going to do it, it's me. I've always been the one willing to make the tough calls." Arya shook her head, though her heart sank. This wasn't just about a decision. They were all ready to face what had to be done, but none of them were prepared for the loss of a comrade. "No one is making the choice alone," she said, her voice firm. "This is a choice for all of us. If one of us sacrifices something, then the others will give something too. No one should be left to bear this alone." Dr. Patel, his eyes wide with the weight of the situation, nodded. "Arya's right. Whatever we do it together. If we're to heal what was broken, it must be all of us." Arya took a deep breath and turned back to the structure. The machine, or whatever it was, seemed to hum with expectation, the glowing symbols on its surface pulsing rhythmically, as though it was waiting for them to make their move. It felt as if Terra itself was watching them, weighing their resolve. The air felt charged, heavy with a decision yet to be made. But then, just as they were about to take a step forward, a new voice spoke. "You think this decision is yours alone." The voice was deep, resonating through the cavern like a tremor, shaking the very walls. It was Terra's voice, but this time it was stronger, more present, as if the storm itself had come alive in their presence. Before Arya could respond, the ground beneath their feet rumbled violently. The energy in the cavern spiked, and the storm outside intensified once more, its fury building to a deafening crescendo. The pressure was overwhelming. Terra's form began to materialize again, but this time it was different. It wasn't a mere flicker of light or shadow. It was solid, towering, made of the very essence of the earth itself. Terra loomed before them, a being of ancient power and untold wisdom, its eyes glinting with the weight of eons. "You misunderstand," Terra said, its voice reverberating through their bones. "This is not a choice for you alone. You are not here to decide who will pay the price. The sacrifice required is not just from one individual, it is from humanity as a whole. Only when the entirety of your species is willing to give something of itself will the balance be restored. Aria's heart thudded painfully in her chest. What do you mean? We came here to save Earth, to stop the storm. If we sacrifice ourselves, if we give everything, will it be enough? Terra's form shifted, its gaze heavy upon her. No, the storm cannot be stopped until humanity recognizes the cost of its actions. The only way to stop the storm is to accept the consequences of your species' past sins. The sacrifice is not one of blood. It is the willingness to relinquish what you hold dear. The storm's fury continued to rise, but in that moment, a strange clarity washed over Aria. The sacrifice wasn't about one life. It was about a collective acknowledgement. Humanity had to let go of its past arrogance, its insatiable greed, and offer a path forward. And that path would demand something far greater than just a single individual sacrifice. It would require all of humanity to be willing to change. Then we will make that choice, Aria said, her voice unwavering. We will show Terra that we are ready. The cavern was still. The rumbling of the earth had died down, but the storm outside had not abated. In fact, its intensity seemed to have increased in response to Terra's words, as if the planet itself were waiting for them to make a final decision. Aria's heart pounded in her chest as she faced Terra's form, the immense figure of ancient power looming before her. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the cavern, a strange, suffocating calm had taken over. Terra's voice echoed in their minds, not as sound, but as a deep resonance, like a memory long forgotten. The price is greater than you know, Terra intoned, its presence pressing in on them. Humanity's history is woven with threads of destruction, but there is hope in this moment. To stop the storm, you must give more than a single sacrifice. You must offer your future. The words hung in the air like a heavy mist. The storm howled again, but it was distant now, as if the storm itself had become less of a threat and more of a judgment. What do you mean? Aria asked, her voice trembling despite her resolve. The weight of Terra's statement was crushing her, and she could feel her thoughts beginning to unravel. Terra's form shimmered slightly, and a gust of wind surged through the cavern, sending a chill down her spine. You must let go of the future you envision. The world you crave, a world built on conquest, unchecked growth, and disregard for the balance. If humanity is to survive, it must choose to relinquish its dreams of dominance. You must choose to become stewards of the earth again, not its rulers. Dr. Paddle stepped forward, his brow furrowed in confusion. Stewards, you're asking humanity to abandon everything it's worked for, to give up our technology, our advancements, our place in the stars. Aria's mind raced. Could it be possible? Could humanity truly give up its ambitions, its desire to reach beyond the stars and dominate the cosmos? The storm, Terra's wrath, was not just about retribution. It was about humanity's future, its very essence. Terra was asking for more than a simple sacrifice. It was asking for a fundamental change in how humans viewed their place in the universe. No, Aria said, her voice firm. We don't have to give up our place among the stars. But we have to give up the arrogance, the greed that drove us to exploit the planet. If we want redemption, we must choose a future where we don't conquer but coexist. The cavern hummed with a strange energy, and Terra's form flickered, almost as though it were reacting to her words. You speak of coexistence, but it is not just an ideal. It is a way of life. To save your species, you must sacrifice your entitlement. The storm will not abate until humanity has shown the willingness to yield. The silence that followed was unbearable. Aria's mind reeled. What Terra was asking was nothing short of impossible. It wasn't about sacrificing one life, one person. It was about asking an entire species to change the very way they thought. Humanity had always viewed itself as the pinnacle of evolution, always striving for more power, more knowledge, more land, more control. Could they give that up? Could they put aside centuries of ambition for the greater good? We can't change the past, Arya said softly, her eyes scanning the faces of her team. But we can change the future, if we want to stop this storm. To stop Terra's wrath, we have to show that humanity is willing to choose something different, a future where we learn from our mistakes. Tord stepped forward, his expression torn. And what about the sacrifices we made? What about the people we've lost to this storm? He looked toward the entrance of the cavern, where the storm raged, like an uncontrollable beast, pounding at the walls of the planet. We've already paid a price. Are you asking us to give up everything we've fought for just to stop a storm? Arya could feel the tension rising. It was clear that some of her team still struggled with the enormity of the choice. How could they give up what they'd worked for, what they'd fought for, just to appease a force they couldn't fully understand? How could they abandon everything they'd achieved in the name of some ideal of coexistence? We don't have to give up our humanity, Arya said, her voice gaining strength. But we have to change. We've already seen the consequences of our past actions. We've seen the destruction, the scars left on the earth. The storm is just the beginning. If we don't act, we will lose everything. We have a choice, to continue down this path of destruction, or to choose a different way. The silence that followed was profound. No one spoke, but the weight of Arya's words hung in the air. She could see it in their eyes. They understood. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the soul of humanity itself. We choose to change, Arya said finally, her voice steady, resolute. We choose redemption. With those words, something shifted. The storm outside seemed to quiet for a moment, the intensity dimming just slightly, as if Terra had acknowledged their decision. The pulsating energy from the cavern walls began to hum in a different tone, one that was softer, gentler, yet filled with immense power. Terra's form rippled, and a deep resonance filled the cavern. You have chosen wisely. Now you must walk the path you have set. The storm will dissipate, but it is not enough to simply stop it. You must carry the weight of your decision forward. Arya nodded, her heart pounding with the realization of what lay ahead. The storm would not stop just because they had made a choice. No, they would have to prove themselves, prove to Terra, to the earth, to themselves, that they were worthy of redemption. And as the cavern's walls began to pulse with energy, Arya knew that the true battle had only just begun. The storm had been a test, but the real work was in the future they would now have to build. The air in the cavern had changed, no longer heavy with the tension of indecision. There was a strange calm now, as though Terra itself had accepted their choice. But despite the relief of the storm's momentary quiet, Arya could feel the weight of their decision settling in. They had made their pledge, but the real challenge was ahead, proving that humanity could honor the path they had chosen. The ground beneath their feet still pulsed, though now the tremors felt less threatening. The glowing symbols on the cavern walls had dimmed slightly, their rhythmic hum growing softer, more melodic, as though the earth itself was breathing in sync with them. Yet the calmness only served to highlight the enormity of what they had committed to. This is just the beginning, Arya muttered to herself, her voice barely above a whisper. Tord stepped up beside her, his face still tight with worry. We've made a choice, but it's not enough to just say it, is it? We have to live it. Terra wants proof that we can change. Arya nodded slowly. The reality of their situation had set in. Terra had granted them a fleeting moment of calm, but the storm wasn't truly over. The Earth, the planet, still demanded a reckoning, and that reckoning would come through the actions they took next. Right now, the storm is just a reflection of our own choices, Arya said. The real test is what happens when we leave this place. When we return to the world outside, we need to show humanity that we've learned from this. Dr. Patel, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. We can't just tell the world about this and expect them to understand. We've spent centuries building a world that runs on exploitation, on the idea that Earth is a resource to be used, not something to be respected. Changing that mindset, it will take more than just a handful of people. It will take a collective awakening. Lara Jones crossed her arms, looking uneasy. How do we even start? The world is fractured. We have governments, corporations, nations that are all bent on continuing the old ways. How do we make them care about a problem they've ignored for so long? Aria's thoughts raced. There was no easy answer, no simple solution. But the moment they had shared with Terra, the moment of reckoning, had shifted something in her. The storm wasn't just about the Earth. It was a mirror of humanity's own fractured spirit, a spirit that had been corrupted by greed, power, and the desire to control. To heal the world, they had to heal themselves first. We start by showing the world what happens when we keep going down this path, Aria said, her voice growing stronger. The storm we just witnessed, that wasn't an isolated event. It's a warning, a sign of things to come if we don't change. If we don't learn to live in harmony with the planet, we'll face consequences far worse than we could imagine. But if we can show the world that change is possible, that we can balance progress with sustainability, then maybe, just maybe, we can stop the storm for good. There was a long silence as her words sank in. The others exchanged glances, each of them feeling the weight of the burden that now rested on their shoulders. It was a burden that went beyond their own survival. They were now the bearers of a message, one that would require the world to listen, to change, or face their own destruction. You're right, Dr. Patel said finally. But the question remains, how do we convince the world that it's not too late? That we still have time to make things right? Aria looked out of the cavern's entrance, where the storm still raged, though its fury had faded slightly. The future outside was uncertain, and it was impossible to predict what would happen next. But one thing was clear. Humanity had a choice, and the clock was ticking. We start small, she said. We go back to the places where the damage has already been done, the places hardest hit by this storm. We show the world that there is another way, one where the planet isn't something to be conquered, but something to be nurtured. Lara nodded, her expression grim but determined. I get it. We can't force them to change, but we can lead by example. We go to those hardest hit places and show that rebuilding doesn't mean just restoring what was destroyed. It means making it better, in a way that works with the land, not against it. Torres looked up at the cavern's ceiling, a thoughtful expression on his face. It's going to be tough. There are powerful interests that won't want to change. But if we show people that we can build a better world, one that doesn't rely on tearing everything down, maybe we'll inspire something bigger. Aria took a deep breath, a feeling of resolve filling her chest. The path ahead wasn't easy, and the storm still loomed over them like a reminder of the fragility of their existence. But they had made a choice, and they would face the consequences of that choice together. They had seen the damage done, both to the Earth and to themselves. Now it was time to rebuild. The storm outside seemed to quiet even more, as if acknowledging their resolve. And yet, Aria knew that their true work had just begun. The task was not to stop the storm. It was to ensure it never returned. They would have to prove that humanity was capable of learning from its past and embracing a future of coexistence. Let's get to work, Aria said, her voice steady. It's time to show the world what we're capable of. With that, the team gathered their equipment, their resolve strengthened. They had come to Earth to stop a storm, but in the process, they had discovered something far more powerful, the chance to change the course of history itself. The real battle was just beginning. The journey back to the surface was a quiet one. As Aria and her team climbed out of the cavern and emerged from the remnants of the ancient city, the storm outside had almost completely subsided. The clouds had broken apart, allowing the first rays of sunlight to peek through the atmosphere. The air felt fresher, lighter, as though Earth itself was beginning to heal. But the calm was not the end. It was merely the beginning of the long road ahead. Aria stood at the edge of the cliff, gazing out over the sprawling landscape. The once ravaged world now seemed almost serene, bathed in the golden light of the dawn. But she knew it wouldn't last. The damage had been done. The storm had been a warning, and its repercussions were still lingering, even if the worst had passed. "We've done it," Torres said quietly, his voice reverberating in the stillness. "We stopped the storm, but I don't think it's over. Not by a long shot." Arya nodded. "No, it's not over. The storm was just the first sign of what will happen if we don't change. We have to make sure it's not the last." The team gathered around her, and for the first time since they'd landed, there was a sense of unity, of purpose. They were no longer just a team of survivors. They were messengers of a new vision, a new path forward. Dr. Patil adjusted his glasses, his eyes thoughtful. "We've learned that the storm was not a random act of nature. It was a reflection of humanity's greed. But if we're truly going to change the future, we can't just go back to the way things were. We have to show people how to live in balance with the Earth, not just survive on it." Lara Jones looked out over the landscape as well, her eyes narrowed in determination. "We need to take that message to the world, to the places hardest hit by the storm. People are scared. They'll need to see that change is possible, not just in words, but in action. They need to see us rebuilding." "We can start with the regions affected by the storm," Arya said, turning back to face the others. "But we'll need more than just rebuilding. We need to start new initiatives, global sustainability efforts, new technologies that harmonize with the planet, educational programs that teach the next generation how to live in balance with the environment." Torres raised an eyebrow. "You think the world's ready for that? You think governments and corporations will just jump on board with that kind of change?" Arya hesitated for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. The challenge ahead was daunting. The forces of greed and exploitation ran deep, entrenched in political systems, corporations, and the very fabric of society. She knew that the road to change would be long and fraught with resistance. But in that moment, she also knew something else. This was the only road worth taking. "We won't be able to convince everyone overnight," Arya said, her voice steady with resolve. "But we can show them that a different path is possible. It starts with small actions, leading by example, taking real steps to heal what we've broken. We'll gather like-minded people, local leaders, communities, and show them how to work together." The storm wasn't just a force of nature. It was a wake-up call. And if we want to prevent it from happening again, we'll need to be the change. Dr. Patil smiled faintly, his eyes filled with a mix of optimism and caution. "It's going to take time, but it's worth trying. We've seen the consequences of unchecked ambition. Now we need to show the world that we're capable of something better." Arya turned and looked out at the horizon once more, her mind already racing with the next steps. They had a long road ahead, and the future was uncertain. But as the sun broke through the clouds, casting its light on the earth, Arya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. They couldn't undo the past. They couldn't erase the scars humanity had left on the planet. But they could start again. They could build a future where Earth was no longer something to be conquered but something to be nurtured. A future where humanity would no longer see itself as above nature, but as a part of it. "We'll need allies," Arya said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "We'll need to find those who believe in this vision, and convince those who are still skeptical. But we're not doing this alone. We'll build a coalition of communities, scientists, activists, and leaders. We'll use the lessons we've learned, and we'll share them with the world. If we can stop the storm, we can change the future." Torres nodded slowly, his expression softer now. "If anyone can make this happen, it's us." The team stood together, the weight of their mission clear in their eyes. They had faced the storm, and they had survived. But the true test had yet to come. It wasn't about stopping nature's fury. It was about changing humanity's course. Arya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. It wasn't just her future at stake. It was the future of the entire planet. And as they set out toward the horizon, the world now seemed full of possibilities. though the road ahead would be difficult. But for the first time in a long while, Arya believed that humanity had a chance to redeem itself, a chance to live in harmony with the earth. The storm had passed, the dawn had arrived, and the real work had just begun.